And this is essentially what I've been focusing on, is demystifying the design process for virtual and augmented realities. Because really, we've been doing this for decades, literally. You know, the sensorium from 1957 is this thing where you stuck your head inside this box and it tried to blow air at you, similar to some of the VR experiences we have now. So many people are saying that VR or AR, it's a new medium that we can create experiences with. And I say, it's not really a medium yet. For me, a medium, if you talk about something like film or you talk about painting, it's not just the technology. And then for the past 20 years, okay, 30 years, I started to learn computers all about from the perspective of using a keyboard and a mouse. That's for me what the computer medium is. This started to change about 5-6 years ago when we started getting into tablets, mobile phones, etc. And now we're getting into the mixed reality, the augmented reality, or the virtual reality devices. But that then poses a question, how do we interact with them? If we don't know how to interact with them, and the audience doesn't know what to expect, then that actually forms a big barrier for adoption, whether it's content or experience design. So right now, for most people, the keyboard and mouse is quite straightforward. Pinching and zooming on a screen, that was easy to learn, even though some people might have needed half a day to learn how to do it on their new iPad. And now the question is, what does that mean for virtual, augmented, and mixed reality? Right now, there is not a definition for how to interact in the different environments, even if we try to break it down and say we have the high-end devices like the HTC Vive, where I can actually stand here, I can have tracked controllers, and I can have an experience. It's only just recently where we have mobile devices for virtual reality where we also have a controller, which is coming standard in Gear and Google Daydream, so that people can actually design using that device. And when we're actually inside a virtual reality environment, for example, moving, just the simple fact of going forward isn't really that easily defined. You know, right now a lot of people are working with the idea of teleportation, so I look over here, and then I magically appear over here in the game world, or your story environment. And broadly, we can start to look at whether our experience is going to be more experiential, meaning it's more of a passive experience where someone is viewing a film, for example, or if it is something which is going to be more interactive. And it's not just a question of what interactivity we want to have, but what's the actual story that we want to bring into that experience. Because the story is what, you know, creates an emotional bond between the audience and the technology. So for example, if I jump into the Trials on Tatooine, the HTC Vive experience where I can wield a lightsaber around, I actually don't need to know anything about the story because I've grown up with Star Wars, so I can just go into the experience and start wielding a lightsaber. If it's something more like Planet Smashers, where you essentially act as a god in the universe, throwing planets together, and then understanding the gravitational interaction between those planets, that's something which is more of a experiential development where I'm actually learning how the universe is working around me. So if we focus on these core areas, film design, where we have story structure, narrative, game design, where we understand interactivity, how to onboard users in the process, and user experience, where we might be doing things like journey mapping, experience mapping. We can create a story for how the user is going to interact with our environment. We can bring all these together and we can adapt them to the different experiences that we're trying to develop. Because if we really look at the mediums that we have to work with, whether we're talking about augmented, MR, or AR, we have location, we have coding, artificial intelligence for how different elements are going to interact with the users, for example. And then, of course, we have everything with regards to 2D, 3D media, 360 video, which could be stereoscopic, depending on what capture system we want to use, could be completely computer generated. So if we understand the different layers of the design approach, we can make more sense of how to craft an experience from the plethora of the mediums that we have. And then when we go through the design phase, we can use what could be considered a design thinking approach or an interaction design approach, where we start out with our UX sketching, could be storyboarding, could be user journey mapping, move on to the interaction design, where we understand what technologies, AR, MR, or VR, will be most applicable to that experience we want to provide. And then we go through our build and test phase, prototype, circle back when we learn something from user testing that might affect the journey maps that we made in the beginning. And after going through these iterations, we have a nice process for how to design for these, let's say, unpredictable experiences that we want to provide to the users. Met Command is one of the most recent VR games that I've been jumping into. And I like to focus on this just briefly because it's a very good example how you can spend a lot of money and development time creating this very immersive, essentially a strategy game where you have little military bases and you tell them to build tanks and then they attack the other military bases. And it's really cool. You feel like you're in front of a giant game board. But if you think about it, the game mechanics behind this is just a simple strategy game. So the fact that they created really cool 3D models, the fact that I play it on my $800 HTC Vive with a $2,000 computer, it actually doesn't bring much more value than the game I was playing on my iPod Touch 8-10 years ago when I was wasting time at work, because the game mechanic is exactly the same. So what value did that actually bring, having a VR experience? I mean, it was cool and I bought it, but it really, for the future, it's not that interesting. So the key is to focus on value that's actually bringing something for the user in the immersive environment, not something that can be just very easily copied. So as a context for where I see we are in terms of adopting immersive technologies as a design approach, think about film. When you go to a movie, you're watching a film with a cinematic quality. Cinematic quality basically means that you're displaying the film at 24 frames per second. And that's what we've been taught to believe is high quality entertainment. But the only reason we have 24 frames per second is because when we were transitioning from silent films to talkie films, they had to synchronize the audio, and 24 frames per second was actually just a very nice middle ground between the cost of film, the ability to synchronize sound with the movie, and just doing this in a very economical way. But we've been grown up to feel that that is the way that a high quality entertainment should be. So when you see the same film displayed in a TV, which is displaying the film at 25 or 30 frames per second, it doesn't always give you the same feel. And you think, this is more plastic, this is more cheap. So right now with VR and AR, we're essentially teaching the users what is high quality experience. And it's actually a very big responsibility, because for the future, we want to be able to teach people what is a high quality experience. And they're learning that with each experience that they have right now. So it's a good time to be a designer in immersive experience design. I'm an artist engineer. We're developing some different applications in the company, and if you'd like to talk about experience design, I'm around Zurich, on Twitter, Facebook, etc. Thank you.